Hello and welcome to What the F*** Just Happened Today, your essential guide to the daily shock and awe in national politics. I'm Joe Amditis. Let's get to it. It's Monday, March 14th, 2022. Welcome to day 419. The Secretary General of NATO warned that Russia's false claim that the U.S. is working with Ukraine to develop biochemical weapons could be used by the Kremlin as a pretext for the use of chemical weapons. Quote, "We must remain vigilant because it is possible that Russia itself could plan chemical weapons operations under this fabrication of lies," said Jens Stoltenberg. "That would be a war crime," end quote. Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby added, quote, "It is of the Russian playbook that which they accuse you of, they're planning to do now," end quote. Now, again, Kirby added, "We haven't seen anything that indicates some sort of imminent chemical or biological attack right now, but we're watching this very, very closely." Kirby also said Russian forces are broadening their target sets after rockets hit a Ukrainian military base near the Polish border. Meanwhile, the Kremlin instructed Russian state media to feature Fox News host Tucker Carlson, quote, "as much as possible," end quote, according to a leaked memo produced by the Russian Department of Information and Telecommunications Support. The 12-page war memo told Russian media that it is essential to use more Carlson segments in their coverage because he sharply criticizes the actions of the United States and NATO, and his position on the war in Ukraine is, quote, "Russia is only protecting its interests and security," end quote. On March 9th, Carlson repeated Russian disinformation, which stated that the U.S. government set up biowarfare labs in Ukraine, which Carlson called, quote, "totally and completely true," end quote. The following day, a recommendations for coverage memo from the Russian agency advised state media to relay the message that, quote, "the activities of military biological laboratories with American participation on the territory of Ukraine carried global threats to Russia and Europe," end quote. The document also encouraged the anchors to allege that the United States is, quote, "working on a biogenocide of the Eastern Slavs," end quote. The claims of U.S.-run biological research facilities in Ukraine are not true. Russia also asked China for military equipment to support its invasion of Ukraine, as well as economic assistance to circumvent the sanctions that the U.S. and its allies have imposed on Putin and the Kremlin. Joe Biden's national security advisor Jake Sullivan, however, warned China not to try to bail out Russia, saying, quote, "there will absolutely be consequences for large-scale sanctions evasion efforts. We will not allow that to go forward and allow there to be a lifeline to Russia from these economic sanctions from any country anywhere in the world," end quote. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki added that China will face significant consequences if it violates the international sanctions against Russia. Meanwhile, the Biden administration approved an additional $200 million in arms and equipment meant for Ukraine, which includes Javelin anti-tank missiles and Stinger anti-aircraft missiles. Altogether, the administration has authorized $1.2 billion in weapons for Ukraine. Separately, 58 members of the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus urged Biden to facilitate the offer from Poland to deliver MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine. The Pentagon struck down the proposal, saying fighter jets departing from a U.S. or NATO base could be seen as an escalation of the United States' role in the war. On Friday, Biden announced that in conjunction with other G7 nations and the European Union, the U.S. will revoke the most favored nation trade status for Russia, which would allow the U.S. and others to impose tariffs on Russian goods. And finally, Joe Manchin says he opposes Joe Biden's nominee for the Federal Reserve's top job overseeing banks over her focus on climate change and its threat to financial stability, effectively blocking Sarah Bloom Raskin's confirmation from advancing to the Senate floor. Manchin, who has close ties to the fossil fuel industry and has rejected Biden's climate agenda, said the Federal Reserve is not an institution that should politicize its critical decisions. Raskin previously called for stronger climate policies, writing last September that regulators should, quote, "ask themselves how their existing instruments can be used to incentivize a rapid, orderly, and just transition away from high-emission and biodiversity-destroying investments," end quote. Raskin will now need at least one Republican to support her nomination in order to be confirmed. That's all for now. You can find the links and sources for all of these stories on the main website. And as always, visit whatthefjusthappenedtoday.com for the latest news and headlines. Until next time, I'm Joe Amditis.